You know, when we think about digital investigations, it's always the hunt for evidence that gets all the attention, right? But what happens after you find that smoking gun? Well, all that amazing detective work is pretty much useless if you can't communicate it. So today, we're diving into the final, and I'd argue most critical act, crafting the perfect forensic report. And trust me, this isn't just some boring paperwork. We're talking about the story that actually wins the case.
Okay, so you've done it. You found the digital smoking gun. The case is cracked. But here's the thing. The real challenge is just beginning. How in the world do you translate gigabytes of data and all these cryptic artifacts into a story that a judge, a jury, or maybe a CEO can actually wrap their head around? Let's break down exactly how to do that.
So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about why the report really is the make or break final act. Then, we'll get into the super important topic of tailoring it to your audience. After that, we'll break down the essential anatomy of a report, see how technology can lend a hand, and finally, we'll reveal the one rule you just cannot afford to forget.
All right, first up, let's kind of reframe how we think about this whole report thing. It's not just an appendix or some afterthought. It's the grand finale. This is the moment where all your hard work gets presented, and it's where a case is won or lost. And it's not always about the evidence itself, but about how clearly you can explain it.
So what is it, really? Well, think of the report as the official record that wraps up the whole investigation. It's how you formally present everything you found to the people making the decisions. And it doesn't matter if that's a company dealing with an internal problem or, a court deciding someone's actual fate. Okay, on to our second point, and this one is absolutely critical. The idea of a one-size-fits-all report? Yeah, that's just a recipe for disaster. The real key to making a report that works is tailoring all those technical details to the person who's actually going to be reading it.
Just think about the two extremes, right? In a civil case, say a corporate dispute, management doesn't need to see every single sector-by-sector breakdown of a hard drive. They just want the bottom line. But flip that around. In a public court case, oh yeah, every single technical detail matters. You have to lay it all out there to prove your methods are sound to a judge and jury.
Okay, so what actually goes into a good report? What are the essential ingredients? Let's take a look at the blueprint, the core parts every report needs to be clear, complete, and most of all, credible.
Every good report needs a solid logical structure. You start with who you are and what the case is about. The meat of it is, of course, the investigation details, followed by a nice, clean summary of what you found. And then there's this last part, which, honestly, so many people overlook, but it's crucial. A section that just explains the terms you're using. And this right here is a perfect example of why that explanation of terms section is so darn important. You can't just assume your reader knows what unallocated disk space is, but if you simply define it as, the place on a drive where deleted files might still be hiding, suddenly it makes sense. You make everything easy to follow and you build trust. They see you're not trying to hide behind complicated words. So, let's dig a little deeper into that investigation details section for a second. You can think of this as your procedural diary. Everything has to be documented. The specific version of the software you used, the techniques you applied, and this is critical, you need to include the chain of custody forms. This is how you prove the evidence was handled properly and kept safe from the moment you got it to the moment it's in a courtroom. All right, so we know crafting the story needs that human touch, right? But that doesn't mean you have to sit there and log every single artifact by hand. Thank goodness. Modern forensic software has some pretty powerful reporting features that can assemble all that raw technical data for you, and it's a massive time saver. Tools like Autopsy, which is open source, are just a massive help here. As you're going through your analysis, you can tag items you think are interesting and add your own notes. And the cool part is, later on, the software can just automatically pull all that stuff you tagged, along with other artifacts, right into a structured report.
And getting this done is usually super straightforward. Seriously, it's just a few clicks. You go to Generate a Report, pick a format like HTML or Excel, tell it whether to include everything or just the stuff you tagged, and boom, click Finish. It organizes all that technical evidence for you. But, and this is a really important but, you have to remember that these tools are just one part of the puzzle. I like to think of these auto-generated reports as just the raw ingredients for a meal. They give you the facts, but they need a skilled investigator to provide the story. Your manually written narrative adds the context and the clear explanations that turn a long list of data into a compelling case. Technology is an amazing partner in this, for sure, but it's not a replacement for your expertise.
Okay,
This brings us to our final and honestly most important section. If you only remember one thing from our chat today, please make it this. This is the bedrock, the foundation of every single effective forensic report.
It really is this simple. The people who are making big decisions based on your report, we're talking judges, lawyers, executives, they are not digital forensics experts. They don't have an IT background. Your job isn't to show off how smart you are with a bunch of jargon. It's to empower them by being crystal clear.
There's a quote from our source material that just hits the nail on the head. Make sure to use simple language. That's it. That's the golden rule. Your credibility, it doesn't come from using big, complex words. It comes from making the complex stuff simple. That's the mark of a true expert.
All right, so let's wrap this all up. What are the big takeaways? First, always remember the report is the decisive final act. Second, you've got to tailor your level of detail to your audience. Third, take the time to explain every technical term in simple language. And above all else, clarity and simplicity are way more important than showing off with complex jargon. That is how you write a report that actually makes an impact.
And that leaves us with one final and pretty crucial question to think about. In the search for digital truth, finding the evidence is really only half the battle. The other half is telling its story. So when you're searching for the truth, is the story you tell just as important as the evidence you find? I think that's a question every investigator really has to answer for themselves.